Right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Emily Miller, your home in Newburgh. It's July 20th, 2021. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First question to get the ball rolling is why wine?
Yeah, I was expecting that one.
People always do.
I always like to tell people it was just kind of an accident. I fell right into it. So I grew up in San Luis Obispo, California, in a little town called Templeton. Kind of an up-and-coming wine region now, but growing up it wasn't really something I was aware of. And I got to, the time for applying to colleges. I had no idea what I wanted to do. No concept of an idea of a career or whatever. My dream was actually to go to Portland State University to follow my best friend. It just sounded like fun, but we had Cal Poly just down the road, about a half an hour south of us. My mom requested that I apply there because she wanted me close by. Cal Poly makes you declare your major when you're applying, so I was kind of scrolling through what seemed interesting. I mean, I had applied to physics for one college, English for another. I really had no idea what I was doing. And I got down to the bottom of degrees and there was wine and viticulture there. And for whatever reason, 18-year-old me was like, oh, this will really show my parents. It was kind of like this weird act of rebellion, I guess. And so I applied as a wine and vit major, got accepted. Luckily, my mom sat me down a couple weeks later and was like, this has everything you've ever wanted in a job. You'll always live in a beautiful region. You've got the opportunity to travel, opportunity to talk and interact with people all in the industry and work with plants, a little bit of science, a little bit of physical labor, all the things that I didn't realize I wanted in a job, but kind of came right together perfectly. So I went to Cal Poly, started my wine and viticulture degree. Even after the first year, I still wasn't really sold, wasn't sure if it was what I wanted. So I was kind of looking into transferring into just a more general plant biology degree. My sophomore year of college, I got my first harvest internship, and I worked with Rhoda down in Templeton, California. And it was like 2 weeks in, I was driving home, totally exhausted, totally sticky and sweaty, and I just had the biggest smile on my face. And we were like in the middle of a heat wave, like it was a brutal vintage. I had broken my leg a couple months before, so I was doing these like ridiculous slopes with like not a cast, but a brace on my leg and just dying every day. And I was driving home like, God, that was a really good day. And that was when it just stuck. It was like, here we are, found the right thing. So stuck with it. Here I am.
For the formal part of the education process, tell me about your experience at Cal Poly, and we'll get to talk about the harvest in a second as well, but I'm curious from the formal part of it, what was the experience like, and what did you kind of gain along the way in terms of interest and experience?
Cal Poly was great. It was a great education, I think. Their big motto is learn by doing, and I think the best thing that they do for you is require an internship. No matter what, concentration you're going into, whether it be vit, enology, or wine business, you're required to work in a winery at some point during your education. And I really think if it wasn't for that first harvest experience, I don't know if I would have stuck with the degree. And having that practical experience is really what kept me through. And I ended up doing a harvest every year for my last 3 years of college, and it's really what pushed me to stay with the industry and help me feel connected and help me feel like I wasn't just getting an education in something, but I was joining a community, and I could feel that community in my area, which I think was the biggest thing for me. They've got a vineyard on site, they've got a working winery on site. I got to get into a little bit of the research side in my senior project, which was super fun. They've got some really amazing professors on staff right now. Fortunately, they didn't join on until I think my senior year of college, so it was kind of a bummer because I feel like the program was really kind of growing in a really great direction. There was going to be a lot of potential, a lot of growth in that particular department, and I think they're going to develop a really awesome program moving forward.
So let's talk about the internship part of it. Tell me about what you were expecting perhaps out of an internship, or what were you looking for out of an internship, and what was it that appealed to you as you started working in it?
I had no idea what I was getting into. I had only done my first year of college, so I had basic general ideas of concepts and ideas of what winemaking looked like, and it all sounded really cool, but I'm a really kind of visual hands-on learner, and so it was difficult for me to conceptualize all of these things without getting into it. So walking into my first harvest, I like had all of these kind of ideas of what these words meant in my head, but not an actual idea of what that was going to look like and how it was going to come together. So it was really fulfilling for me to get into the cellar and finally kind of experience some of the things that I was learning about. And it just was that perfect marriage of like, you know, reading it in a textbook and then actually doing it myself and gaining the understanding of what was going on and, you know, the physical part behind all of the conceptuals, which was great. But yeah, I didn't know anybody that had worked in wine. You know, I had friends whose parents owned vineyards and stuff, but I had never talked to them about it, never learned any part of really what went into winemaking. So walking into that first harvest, all I knew was that I was going to work as hard as I could, you know, and try to learn as much as I could. And so that was kind of my mentality, was ask as many questions as possible and just see what I could get out of it and see if it really clicked. Because like I said, I was, you know, kind of thinking about changing my major, and I was like, so, you know, we're just going to run into it head first, see how it goes. If I like it, and it'll stick. And it did. So I really had no expectations of what I was getting into. And it was definitely more brutal than I think I was anticipating in a lot of ways. But I worked with a fantastic assistant winemaker there, and the head winemaker there was, you know, both of them were great. And I developed really good relationships with them right off the bat. And they really were instrumental in kind of taking me under their wing and, you know, providing me with the answers and the education that I was hoping to get out of them. That made it more worthwhile.
Tell me about the biggest things you learned. What were your biggest takeaways from first harvest?
Oh, my biggest takeaways. Let's see. I think it would just be, you know, to keep pushing and to keep asking questions. I learned the most from all of the questions that I asked. A lot of different little things. There's little things that I still use in my day-to-day, like cellar experiences that I remember from like that first harvest. You know, I had the assistant winemaker, John. His biggest lesson for me was to work with intention. And so it was always like trying to pick up my speed, always trying to move in the most efficient way possible and to like think about the processes of what I'm doing and why I'm doing them, you know, figuring out why you're doing a punch down and why you need to do it a certain way and how. Yeah, he was great, and just kind of instilling in me like helping push me to be the best cellar person I could be, even from the very beginning.
You mentioned that you did 2 more harvests in school. Did you go back to the same place, or did you go to different places for those? I
went to a different place for the next 2 years. So I worked 2 years with Stolo Vineyards down in Cambria, California. So they're actually like the closest vineyard to the coast in all of California. And they make Pinot Noir, Syrah, Chardonnay, Gewürztraminer. And that was a super fun experience for me. It was my first woman winemaker to work with. You know, we brought in probably 40 tons total. It was just this tiny little place. It was me and her. I was her first ever intern. I was the first ever intern at Rhoda as well, actually. So there was a learning curve on both ends for everybody. But she had just had a baby, so it was this super fun vintage where I could go to school at the same time as working harvest, and she had a baby strapped to her chest, and some days she'd be like, "Can you hold the baby while I load the press?" And I'm like, "Okay," and I'm holding the baby, and we're loading fruit, and then I'm, you know, shoving it in, and it was just such a fun experience. And she makes beautiful wines, absolutely beautiful wines. Still to this day, that's one of my top harvest experiences, is working 2 years with Nicole.
What did you notice that was different? I mean, obviously you had one harvest experience at that point, so at that point kind of all you know is from one place. So what was different about your second harvest experience?
So different, completely different. I mean, you know, at Rhoda it was like go, 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 try to get as much done as possible. You know, same thing, I was going to school at the same time that I was working harvest. They would have preferred that I had took the season off, but by the time I got the job, it just wasn't possible with, you know, credits and classes and whatever. And then Stolo was just a totally different game. I mean, so mellow, so relaxed, you know, but with so much intention. Nicole works with so much intention in everything that she does. And she was just such a it was interesting because, you know, on my first vintage, you work with a winemaker, and Jeff was fantastic. I adore Jeff, but he was, you know, a winemaker that works really well under pressure and under a lot of stress, and he carries that stress with him in everything that he does, as most of us do. And Nicole totally had this like kind of zen attitude about how she moved throughout the space and what she did. You know, her husband is the vineyard manager for the site, and we work with all estate fruit there. So you just cross the road and you're in the vineyards, and it's a beautiful, gorgeous setting, and I think it just kind of helped even keeping things calm in that perspective. You sit down at lunch and you're in this big grassy field surrounded by flowers, and you're like, okay, we're doing something cool here, we're making magic a little bit, but we're surrounded by it, and it was such a relaxing environment to be in. And I think Nicole really helped set the standard for like how I want to work as I continue through the industry, of like how I want to treat the people around me, how I want to interact with my, you know, potentially one day employees, and how I want to maintain kind of that level of cool, calm collectedness throughout what can be a really stressful, anxiety-ridden time.
It's interesting. You're kind of already thinking about that as you're interning in college. You're already kind of thinking about your future. So tell me, as you're approaching graduation, what are you thinking for your career? What do you kind of want to do next? What do you kind of have as like a long-term goal at that point?
At that point, when I was leaving college, my main goal was to get as much experience in different varying size facilities as possible. You know, I had worked micro boutique for the most part. Even Rhoda is pretty tiny. So I'd worked at really small places. I knew that I wanted to expand that experience. I knew that even in that moment, I knew that micro boutique was what I was going to want to return back to. Working with Nicole completely shifted my trajectory in this industry. Absolutely. She influences me still today. So I knew that that was where I wanted to return to, but I knew that it was incredibly important to get experience in larger facilities, work with fruit that I may never work with ever again, and, you know, just round out my experience so that one day when I return back to those tiny little spots, I could do everything and it wouldn't be a problem, because I've seen all of it, I've seen it on a larger scale, and I can kind of settle into knowing what I'm working with and knowing what I'm doing. So that was kind of my main goal. I knew I wanted to travel, you know, I wanted to do the whole wide world harvest, jump back and forth for years and years and years. That was the whole plan. Yeah, I graduated college being like, you know, I did one more harvest in California, and I had set plans to go to Australia. And when I left for Australia, I was like telling my parents, like, I'll see you in 5 years. Like, I'll come back for Christmas in a little bit. We'll see. That was the big plan, was to travel as much as I could, get as much experience as I could, and then come home one day and find a little spot to work.
So tell me about that. You obviously, you said you had plans to go to Australia. That's your next steps. Tell us about Australia, and then what comes next.
So I did go to Australia. I got a job with Molly Duker at McLaren Vale, which was great. They were, you know, they're significantly larger than anything I had worked with up to that point. Oh, actually, no, I worked with Trinchero in between. So I worked at Trinchero. That was my first really large job facility experience. And I was in the lab there, which was awesome. They had just bought a brand new facility, so I got to be there as they kind of redesigned this entire new lab, brought in all the new people, all the new equipment. It was an invaluable experience, absolutely, because I just learned so much in how to organize and develop a new spot, which was great. So then I jumped to Molly Duker, and it was, you know, again, a whole new world. I was in Australia. There were giant spiders everywhere and kangaroos, and I was like, what's going on? And again, a much larger facility than what I was usually working with. So when I was there, I did lab as well, but we did, you know, I had applied for a cellar position, and they really needed someone in the lab, and they were like, you have lab experience, it'd be really helpful, please. I was like, okay, fine. So I did the lab again, and I'm really glad that I did. It was a really great experience, and again, helped me kind of nail down, you know, the comfortability of working in the lab and kind of finding my flow in that part of the industry. But when we switched over to night shift, I got to jump into the cellar a lot more and kind of get involved with that. And being the lab person allowed me to kind of float through the facility a lot more than I would have in the cellar. I would have been stuck kind of doing one thing, but more of the time I got to go and see the crush pad and see what that looked like receiving fruit. I got to run around and help with cap management whenever I wanted to, and I got to do a lot of inoculations. So it allowed me to run around and see a lot more than I think I would have seen if I had just been in the cellar experience, which was really, really fun. But yeah, getting that bigger winery experience too was great. I mean, I was going from being the singular and first intern ever to being one of like 35 and, kind of learning and watching and seeing what it's like to be kind of a part of a team. And that was kind of my first like big like camaraderie harvest experience of like being a part of that community and like the mutual suffering and the mutual joy that you get that comes with harvest, of watching everybody run around and jumping in to help when you can and having someone else jump in and help you when you need it. And that was super fun, really exciting experience.
So you already had in your mind the kind of micro boutique was what you wanted to come back to. Did your first kind of experiences in larger wineries, did that change it at all, or did it kind of reinforce what you already thought?
It did kind of push the micro boutique off to the side a little bit in my mind, I think. I had so much fun at Molly Duker and really enjoyed being a part of such a big team that it did kind of push that set standard of micro boutique out of my mind a little bit. And I think that's how I, in the next couple of years, I ended up at all of the places that I did, because I wasn't so focused on, I need to get this experience, I need to get that experience, I need to stay at micro boutique. It kind of allowed me to like open my mind up to what other opportunities there are, because there's so many. I mean, every different winery offers something completely different, a new experience, a new learning experience. So it was good because I got to see this large place and I had so much fun with it that it helped me kind of let go of all of my preconceived notions of what it was going to be like. In my head it was like, I don't want to work at a big tank farm and be stuck doing the same thing all day every day, and it absolutely wasn't that. It was just as much fun, just as dynamic as working in those small places. It totally shifted my mentality of working in larger places. It helped me learn that like I love multitasking, and I love when there's like 7 different things to think about and balancing it all at the same time and having that fluidity of like finding your zone and finding your pace. And that wasn't something that I had experienced before. So I think it kind of helped push me and like trust my own skills and capabilities a lot more. In the micro boutique I could kind of sit back and relax a little bit more, and we move at our own pace when you're that small, because you can, and you don't have that same luxury in a larger facility. It helped test my boundaries and build my confidence quite a bit, which I think I needed.
From your perspective, what were the sort of the biggest challenges to making wine at scale? What were the biggest differences from, obviously you mentioned the pace. What were the biggest challenges of making that amount of wine in that short amount of time?
I think the biggest one for me that I, like I said, hadn't experienced before was, like the pace and the structure of all of it. You have to have such a set structure of like how you're going to do things and when you're going to do them and how you can get them done, and just learning to like, like in the lab, when you've got 200 samples you need to run through and they want it done by lunch so that you can do the second round after lunch, it's like you really need to find a way to kind of set a pace for yourself and push yourself through that process. I mean, you get to 150 samples and you're like, oh my God, when will it end? And it doesn't end, and you have to be okay with that. And you have to learn to just push through it, which was totally new for me and stressful and a difficult transition, but totally key. And when you get to those larger facilities, it's all about juggling and learning how to juggle and having so many things going all at once. It's just a good time.
What about the other part of it for you? Is first time sort of being away from home. What was the adjustment like for you on a non-work, more personal level?
A huge adjustment. Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in the same county that I went to college in, and I had these big dreams of traveling the world, and and then I got to Australia and I was like, I miss my mom. I miss my family. I miss the cat. It was, all of these little creature comforts that you don't think about that, that really tug at your heartstrings that you would never expect, you know, as weird and simple as like your favorite kind of cookie back home and you just can't get in Australia. You know, something like it, but not quite. That was incredibly difficult, but again, I think the biggest thing for me, I think one of my favorite parts of the wine industry has always been the people and always been the community, and that was where I found my comfort. You know, I moved all the way across the world, could only talk to my family at these random increments of time at night or early in the morning, you know, which was great for 24-hour night shifts and 12-hour, you know, the full days. That worked out. But, you know, I found people that had lived completely different lives from me, and somehow this one product brought us back together, and we had a shared interest right off the bat, and we could discuss similar experiences that we had shared, whether they came from New Zealand or, you know, I came from Central Coast California. And what I thought was really interesting was, like, you know, I met people who had shared interests, but also people that knew people that I knew. It's such a small international community, and it's crazy. I met a girl that I grew up with in the same town. We knew the same family friends. Her brother was in my middle school class, and I didn't meet her until I was in Australia. And we went to college together at the same time and everything. And it just helps you kind of put your life in perspective that, you know, yeah, sure, I'm homesick, but like this could be home too. And it is for a while. And you meet people that make a huge impact in your life that, you know, years later you still think about them and you still think about the great times that you had. Don't get me wrong, it was a huge struggle. I struggled quite a bit in the long distance and being away from home, and that was really, really hard, but I was able to find comfort in the community of this industry.
So what comes next after Australia?
After Australia, I was just homesick enough to give up on my worldwide tour plans. I decided I would come home, but I knew that I didn't want to just come home and go back to California and go back to the Central Coast. It was too much too soon. I was like, I can't give up on like the whole worldwide tour plans. I got to do something a little different. So that brought me to Oregon, actually. So I was sitting in Australia, had no idea what I wanted to do. I was working 12-hour shifts, and then I was coming home, cleaning up the best I could, and doing Zoom interviews, or Skype at the time. Sorry, we didn't have Zoom yet, but Skype interviews with places in Oregon, because, you know, one of my college best friends moved up to Portland. I had thought about going to Portland when I was in high school for school. Something just kind of kept drawing me north. I don't know what it was. I have really no explanation, but I was like, it just seems to make sense. It's close enough, but it's still something completely different from what I've done before. So yeah, I just started scouring wine jobs, trying to see what I could find. I ended up, I was stuck between, well, I reached out to Nicole, who I worked with at Stolo. She does, she was on the board for a lot of years with oh my gosh, what is it called? Oh, my best friend's on the committee for it. She's gonna be really mad at me. World of Pinot Noir, it's a big event down in Santa Barbara. And they have a lot of Oregon producers that come down. So I reached out to Nicole and I was like, I'm thinking about going to Oregon. Do you have any suggestions? So I took her suggestions, but you know, I was on wine jobs too. And I found Soter Vineyards on wine jobs, and I found Anime through Nicole. And so I had, you know, neck and neck job interviews with them. And I was sitting there, you know, in Australia, trying to figure out where I'm gonna go next. And, you know, I ended up accepting a job with Soter and packed up my bags, flew home, lived at home for a month with my parents, soaked up that comfort, and, you know, and then got in the car and drove on up.
You mentioned Oregon having kind of a draw over you that you didn't really understand. Mm-hmm. Did you, at the time, did you think Oregon was a place that you might want to stay for a while, or was it kind of another stop along the worldwide tour?
Totally a stop on the tour. I had no intention of staying. I had every intention of coming up here, doing something different, and then going from there, whether that was another international harvest or finding a job down back in California. It's all, you know, always in the back of my mind, it's the end goal to get back to California and live, you know, closer to my family and be in California. I grew up there. I love it. Can't help myself. I know all the Oregonians hate it, but I love it. So that was totally the plan. I had no intention of staying. Not even a little bit. No inkling of like yeah, I think I could stay there for a couple of years. So here I am 3 years later.
So tell us about that first experience at Soter. First of all, before we talk about Soter, tell us about kind of first impressions of Oregon wine. You've seen California, you've seen Australia. What were your first impressions of Oregon, of the place and of the industry and of the people here compared to those other two?
Yeah. You know, it was kind of like my first harvest at Rhoda. I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. You know, I'm sure I had Oregon wines along the way, but it wasn't anything that had ever stood out to me. I knew that they made Pinot Noir, which is what I did at Stolo for 2 years. So I was like, this is a relatively comfortable transition. I know these varietals. I've worked with them before, you know, so this should work. It should be fun. But I didn't really have a concept of like what the industry was like up here. I had no concept of, you know, what the climate was even really like, or not very much information on this at all. And really oh my gosh, I cannot believe how I did this, but I just landed a job at Soter. And I remember, you know, finding it on Wine Jobs and like reading through and looking at their website and being like, yeah, this sounds pretty cool. Okay. You know? And I'm like, God, I had no idea. Like, I landed this incredible job, you know, and I worked with this incredible team, and I look back at it like, man, you were so clueless about what you had stumbled upon. And I just feel so thankful for the opportunities that I've been able to find, you know, and a lot of it has been hard work, you know. I don't want to discredit myself to some extent. I've worked really hard to get what I had, and, you know, and it worked out really well. It's paid off really well, but yeah, there sure was some dumb luck in there, because, you know, it wasn't like I saw Soter on there and was like, oh shit, Soter, like, I want to go for that. It was like, oh, okay, that place looks kind of cool. They've got cows. I like it. Yeah, total accident. And I feel really lucky for where I ended up, because, I mean, I did that first harvest at Soter, and it was probably like halfway, maybe 3/4 in, when it finally clicked, where I was like, I've got no plans after this. I've got nothing better to do. I think maybe I should just stay here, you know? And I've got my mom on one end being like, no, come home. And I've got my dad on the other end like, I think you should stay there. You seem really happy. This seems like a really good fit for you. I think that, you know, like I said, I got nothing better to do. You know, why not? I might as well stick around. So, you know, I'm really thankful for Soter and the opportunity and the experience that it gave me, because it got me to kind of stay here in the valley. Got me hooked.
Like every Californian before you.
Yep, yep. Oh, and Chris is just going to have the biggest smile on his face when he hears this. Oh, man.
Well, let's talk about that experience. Tell me about the Soter experience. You, obviously, like you said, you kind of came in with no real expectations or real knowledge of what you were getting into. So tell me about the first harvest there at Soter and what it was that made you want to stay.
I think for me, Soter was like, oh my gosh, you could ask all of my friends. They've heard the whole Soter story endlessly since 2018. I think we got really lucky. I think for us, it was the perfect storm. We had this amazing team, and to this day, it's the best harvest crew that I've worked with, of just complete and utter support for each other. Constantly, every day, it was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. What do you need to get done? How can I help you? You know, prioritizing the right thing. We just melded together in every possible way. And that was a huge part of why, you know, I think I decided to stick around. Was I had this incredible team. I got really lucky. I landed in a house with a bunch of other wine industry professionals, and I just had the best time. I mean, my social life was great. You know, the community that I found was fantastic. And work was fantastic. I think what really drew me to Soter was the opportunity again for learning. I think I've tried to maintain throughout my career that, you know, everything is an opportunity for learning and for growth. I try really hard to maintain that perspective from my first harvest of asking as many questions as I can as possible, trying to like keep myself grounded to like, you're not always the smartest person in the room and you have a lot to learn. And that's a good place to be, because when you're surrounded by the kind of people that I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by, there's so much to learn. And if you walk in with that attitude of like, I don't need to learn anything, this is my, you know, 6th, 7th, 7th harvest, whatever, like, then you're not going to learn anything. And what's the point? of continuing to do those harvest experiences. Why are you there then? And I think for me, you know, Chris and I just totally clicked right off the bat, and to me, he was a great person to learn from, and he was always happy to share, you know, why he did things and how he did them and how he learned that knowledge himself. You know, what drew me there in the first place was in our interview, I told him that, you know, I had kind of been stuck in the lab for a couple of years and I was kind of bored, and he was like, we won't put you in the lab. If you want to be in the cellar, you're going to be in the cellar. And I was like, that sounds perfect. And he was like, do you have forklift experience? And I was like, no, but I really want to learn. And I had been trying for years to get on a forklift. And he was like, if you want to learn a forklift, you're going to be on a forklift. You know, and there we were. First couple weeks in, we're on a forklift. And it was great. And he put me on there as much as he could. And when I got stuck in certain spots, he was there to, you know, make fun of me for it and then help pull me out and help explain, like, why I got stuck and where I was and what I did wrong. He was such a wonderful helping hand along the way. And then the same thing with the other interns. I mean, they were there to just learn, you know, nobody was there to show off and be the best intern of the year, you know. We just were all there to like have a good time, to work super hard and to learn as much as we could from Chris and from Tony and, you know, from Nadine in the vineyards. I mean, gosh, what an experience to stumble upon. It was pretty great.
You mentioned that you had some experience with Pinot Noir earlier on in your career. Tell me about working with Pinot. Was it something that the first time around was something you wanted to do again, you were excited about? Did the grape stand out to you among others, or was this just something where you had familiarity with it and felt comfortable with it?
I think it was more of a comfortability. Yeah, I hadn't quite fallen in love with Pinot Noir yet. It wasn't really something that held a whole lot of interest. You know, I mean, I grew up in Templeton. There's plenty of Zin and cabs and these really beautiful but really heavy hitters coming through. So it was a bit refreshing, you know, to go to Stolo and work with Pinot and have something a little bit lighter, but, you know, just as dynamic and just as exciting and fun to taste as anything else I had seen, but just a totally different style. But I think moving up here, it wasn't like, yes, I want to work with Pinot Noir. It was like, yeah, I've done that before. It was just a comfortability to it that, you know, I knew I had done it. I knew I could do it again. And, you know, there was some similarities between what Stolo did and what Soter did. So it was a nice transition for me to kind of ease into.
So you have this kind of revelation during harvest at Soter that maybe you want to stick around to work a bit longer than you anticipated. So tell me about harvest wraps up at Soter. What comes next?
Man, another totally serendipitous moment. I feel like it's always been kind of a theme in my life of just serendipity and kind of letting these little things lead me in the right direction. I'm a really big believer in following your gut and following your intuition, and if you kind of, you know, try not to fight it too much, for me, I've seen that things kind of, you catch the wave and you ride it on out. So we had done, Soter was great in taking us around the valley and introducing us to, you know, other people in the industry and showing us other cellars and stuff. So we actually did a cellar tour out at Ponzi. And I remember looking around being like, damn, this is a big facility. Like, whoa, this is crazy. But again, nothing in particular really stood out to me. I was just like, wow, this is really cool. Like, gravity flow has always been really interesting to me. I've always kind of wanted to try it. You know, we did a little bit at Stolo because we're small enough. You just lift your tanks up and you fill your barrels by lifting your tanks up, just because that's the easiest thing to do, not for any really necessary like intention. So I remember walking through being like, this is kind of cool, and JP leading us around and being like, he's pretty cool, this could be kind of fun. But no super interest in it. And so we did our tour. I think that was like a couple of days before Halloween, and I ended up going to a Halloween party a couple days later, where again totally tried to push myself out of my comfort zone. Really didn't want to be at this party, and I looked over and there was this girl standing there, and I just struck up a conversation with her, and it ended up being Julia, which was the enologist at Ponzi. And she was like, oh, that's right. And I was like, oh yeah, we just toured with you. And she's like, yeah. She's like, so what's next? What are you doing? And I was like, you know, She's the first person I said this to out loud. I go, you know, I think I just want to stay here. I don't really have any plans. I think I want to stay in Oregon. I'm ready to transition to a full-time position and give that a try. And she's like, yeah, good for you. All right, well, you know, enjoy the party. I'm like, okay, yeah, have a good night. And I walk away, and 10 minutes later I'm leaving because I'm like, I'm done here. And then I think like maybe a week later, she texted the full-time guy at Soter and said, tell your girl we've got a job opening. We're hiring for a full-time cellar position at Ponzi. Tell her to send in her resume. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. You know? I have a friend who works in HR, and she really, really hates me for this part of the story, but I didn't know how to get in contact with Louisa Ponzi. I didn't have her email address. I didn't have any contact information for her. The only email address that I could find on the website was like info@ponzivineyards.com. And I was like, you know, pretty much everybody's just like their name at the winery. And she would get so mad at me, like, no, like, you need to reach out to someone. You know, she's in HR, she's a professional. So she's like, you have to do this professionally. You got to make sure you're going to the right place. And I'm like, I think I got it. I think it's going to be fine. So I just send my resume to Louisa at Ponzi Vineyards. You know, I'm like, this is going to work out great. And she's fuming. And then like 2 weeks go by and I don't hear anything. And I'm like, oh man, like I really screwed that up. Like she was right. I should have found like a confirmed email address. I am just sweating. And after 2 weeks, I got an email back from the assistant winemaker, JP. And he's like, Louisa passed me your resume. We'd love to have you come in, come do an interview. I had like 1 more week before I moved back to California, just because I didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was doing. It was close to Christmas. And I was like, I'm gonna go home for a month. You know, from there I'll apply to jobs, see what I can get. I had applied to a couple places and just hadn't even got responses. No one had said anything. And I was like, man, my resume's not that bad. So I finally got that email back from JP, and I was like, I leave for California in a week, but name a time and a place and I'll be there and I'll meet you. And so we scheduled an interview for 2 days later. To this day, the best interview I've ever had with someone. We just like talked for like an hour and a half, and we just had the best time. And I was like, wow, I really nailed that one. And he emailed me the next day and he's like, can you come in and meet Louisa? So the day before I drove home to California, I met Louisa. Didn't go quite as smoothly as JP, that's fine, we got there, but still pretty good. And by that night I had an offer. It was just, you know, kismet, just meant to kind of happen, totally fell into place. So I went home, did Christmas with my family, somewhere in between there got a job offer for a job in New Zealand as well, came back, worked at Ponzi for 2 months, left for 6 weeks for a harvest in New Zealand, and then came back to Ponzi and continued off from there. So kind of a whirlwind experience of, you know, suddenly deciding I've got nothing better to do, I might as well stay here, and then again falling into place working at this winery that has way more history and weight and meaning to it than I ever could have expected, and just landing somewhere incredible. Having no idea of how I really got there, but landing it, yeah.
So let's talk about, first of all, about Ponzi itself a little bit, and about that. You mentioned the history and the weight of it. Tell me at what point that kind of you feel that, or you notice that when you work there.
You know, I think it kind of took a while. It was like, you know, during the interview, it was like, you know, coming into terms of realizing, you know, the history and the weight behind it, and like learning the actual history of Ponzi and all of that. But it wasn't until, you know, I got started, and I think probably my first harvest with them was when the full weight of where I got to be really hit me. And when I really got to develop more of a relationship with Louisa and really get to start to learn from her and show her what I could offer and figure out what she had to offer, which is a hell of a lot. Yeah, it was really that first harvest, and seeing all of these, you know, Ponzi really strives to bring in internationals and for harvest interns, and a big part of that is for the benefit of the staff to make these connections with people that are from all around the world. And that first vintage, we ended up with a team that was like pretty much entirely internationals that came from like long-standing winemaking families. And that was huge. I mean, to meet all of these people that within themselves and at their homes, their families have this huge name behind them, and they're drawn to this place, Ponzi Vineyards, where they want to be and they want to come and learn from. And to be on the full-time staff of a place like that, and to be someone that contributed to their experience and to their learning process, that was like, whoa, how did I get here again? Like, I was just like, wow, this is pretty incredible. And again, I'm pretty lucky. And again, you know, I put a lot of hard work into it. I really, really did. But yeah, just feeling really lucky to have landed where I did, and to look around and recognize and understand the influence and the experience that I was getting. It was pretty amazing.
Tell me about the work itself. Obviously, you've done a lot of it at this point. You've done cellar work, you've done lab work, you've done harvest work. Was there anything different about the work at Ponzi than you did before? Where you, or what was the kind of the push for you, or the growth for you there?
Everything about Ponzi was push and growth. Absolutely, from day one. It was a big aha moment of me recognizing that, you know, feeling confident that like I'd done my cellar work and I'd done my lab work and I'd worked at a big facility before, or, you know, a larger facility before, and then getting to Ponzi and being like, whoa, you know, I mean, I knew my basics of cellar work, but in reality, I had only worked harvests. I hadn't really done full-time, you know, year-round work. At Stolo I did, but again, it was like, she'd call me in for a day and be like, we need help bottling, or we need help racking. Like, can you do a couple of hours on Friday? And I'm like, no problem. This was, we're racking for a week and we're trying to hit 80 barrels a day and you've got to get it done. You know, it was a completely different mentality. And I really think that it totally skyrocketed my cellar skills. Yeah, everything there was learning. You know, they have an incredible team full of a ton of experience. And, you know, I mean, when I was there, it was like JP was there. He was going on 9 years, 10 years. We've got Ilario in the cellar. He's like my favorite person in the world. But he's in the cellar there, and he's been with Ponzi for, I think he's going on 12 years now. And it's the only winery he's ever worked at. He knows that facility inside and out, like the back of his hand. And he is the most incredible cellar hand I've ever worked with. So to have that to learn from, it was incredible. And it was such a great experience, because it was like, you know, here's this guy, he's super quiet, super modest, you know. By the end of it, I'd always be like, Lara, you're perfect. You do everything so well. You're incredible. And he'd be like, no, I make mistakes. And I'm like, when? Like, you spelled something wrong on a label. Like, no, you don't make mistakes. So just a huge learning experience. Absolutely honed me to be the cellar person that I am today, which I'm really, really proud of. Completely helped me learn, you know, like I started seeing at Molly Duker, of learning how to juggle and learning how to prioritize things and make smart decisions and to work in a really intentional way. Ponzi drilled that into me in every way possible. You know, they've really pushed me to figure out how to work as efficiently as possible. The current assistant winemaker there, Max, like his whole drive is efficiency. And he was the cellar master when I first started. So, you know, he was there every day helping me learn, you know, why to do things a certain way and how to do them a certain way, and to get to the end process as quickly and efficiently and as smartly as possible, with, you know, top wine quality procedures in mind. Always. It's always focused on wine quality. So it was a great experience of learning the best way to do things in all aspects. Fastest, smartest, top quality, all the way across the board. Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for what they do there. It was a wonderful 2.5 years.
You've talked about intentionality quite a bit through this interview, obviously from the very start, and intentionality can mean a lot of different things. And I'm curious for you, with intentionality, obviously you started at a very small place where it's a very small team, and intentionality means one thing there, right?
Yeah.
Where it's, you know, at a place like Ponzi, tell me about how intentionality is different when you're working with that size of team and that scale of wine. Does it mean the same thing to you to be intentional in that regard, or what does intentionality mean for you there?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's different. You know, you work with intention at a small place because it's kind of higher stakes almost. You've only got one shot with these little lots, and you've got a lot of time, a lot more time in some regards, so you have the space and the ability to work with intention in that regards of like slowing things down and doing them however you need to. I think with Ponzi being at a much larger scale, I was always impressed with how well they maintained the philosophy of intention and like the way they moved with intention, that you can do at a smaller scale but at a large scale. You know, Louisa is meticulous in how she works with her vineyards and with her different lots. You know, I mean, a lot of these vineyards they've got contracts that they've worked with for years and years and years, you know, let alone their own vineyards that they've been working with for, you know, years and years and years. And so watching how she kind of moved and navigated, you know, the growth that company has gone through in the last 50 years, but maintaining the same kind of quality. Like, I felt like there was a lot of things that she did at such a large scale, which was the same things that we would have done at Stolo. Smaller lots, you know, giving everything its own interaction and its own right. Where at a larger place, it's a lot easier to be like, throw it all together and it's all going to end up in one big blend anyway, you know. Throw a lot more of it together for convenience sake and for time's sake and for space sake. But I felt like there was never that cutting of corners. Like, every lot, every vineyard, every, you know, wine got its own special attention and its own push forward. Nothing like kind of was just like, oh, that one will just do its own thing. It was always very meticulous, and I think that was the intention that I was impressed with Ponzi. And like, you know, building such a large facility with gravity flow in mind at every step, you know, that was huge. I mean, they really invested in doing that, and we follow it through every step of the way. We use gravity at every single point that's possible. Sometimes it slows things down, and when you work at a big place like that, it's absolutely a luxury to be able to be like, well, we're going to slow it down because we're concerned about quality. And that's the commitment that they've made. Slow it down every once in a while here and there, because this is how we do things, and this is how we want to continue to do things.
So let's talk about 2020 a little bit, because I know a lot of things changed for you in 2020. So let's talk first of all about the pandemic. So last spring, you're working at Ponzi. COVID comes to town. So tell me about kind of initial reaction, personal, professional reaction to that. What did you have to adjust kind of in personal life, and what did you have to adjust in your work life, and how did you kind of make it through last year?
Yeah. Well, you know, it was a huge adjustment, as it was for everyone across the globe, which is kind of crazy to think about. Something that affected the entire world. It doesn't, you know, happen all that often. Anyway, yeah, it was a big transition. So at the beginning of 2020, you know, we had our yearly reviews, and I got offered to take on the vineyard liaison position, which is kind of like grower relations. I did all of the contracts with all of our growers. I'd go out and do site visits. I'd help I'd facilitate bringing them onto the site so they could see what's going on. They could taste through the wines, all that really fun stuff. So that was a really exciting kind of step up for me. I was really excited to get out into the vineyards more and build relationships. You know, for me, like I said earlier, like, one of my favorite parts of this whole industry is the people and being connected with the people. It's what pushed me to go to full time in the first place. Was like, I'm tired of learning and getting to know people for like 2 months and then being ripped out of that. I wanted to be a part of something. So I got to jump into this vineyard liaison position, which was really exciting, and it really ended up being the saving grace for my whole 2020 year to some extent. And really helped keep me sane as the pandemic picked up and as things locked down. you know, the winery locked down as much as it could. We went on to bare minimum, absolute necessity work. You know, you weren't allowed to be on site unless you absolutely had to. And Louisa was really great about helping transition like my new position into being my way of like being able to still work and being able to like still make money and earn a living and get things done while being productive. So it was a really awesome opportunity. I had almost nothing else to do other than go out to vineyards. And I took every opportunity I could. So I got to go to pretty much every single site that they work with. You know, at this point, I'm only a year and a half into living in the valley, and it's a huge opportunity to go around to all these different sites and with growers that have worked with Louisa for years, and kind of introduce myself, learn about them, learn about their sites, learn the valley as a whole. It was probably, yeah, I mean, the best thing that I could have asked for to have in a pandemic. It got me out of the house, got me into the vineyards. You know, I got to take my dog most of the time. She's a rescue. I had just adopted her in February. She like wouldn't leave her crate for weeks, and then I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna go look at vineyards now. And she loves it. She just run around. So it was a huge escape for the both of us and a really great way to like continue to feel like life could function and move forward, you know? And it was lucky to where like I could meet growers outside, you know, and we could stay distance, we would be safe, we would be outside, we would both wear our masks. You know, we were still uncertain of how this thing moved around and how to navigate that in a lot of ways. But it allowed me to like continue to form connections in a time where my social life and like my connection to this valley was completely shut down. And I still got to do that. So it was like, yeah, the best thing that I ever could have hoped for. I got to learn so much of the region and learn so much about these vineyards and keep moving forward in a time where everything else stopped and stood still. Yeah, it was a weird year.
It's a nice understatement
Yeah.
at the end there. I like that. Obviously, another part of the weird year was last harvest. So tell me about that and about kind of your reaction to it and the adjustments you had to make and the Ponzi had to make last 2020 last harvest as the smoke rolled in. Yeah,
well, the smoke and with COVID, you know, I think Ponzi did. Again, I've got a lot of respect for the way that they kind of handled the situation. You know, the assistant winemaker, Max, he's really dedicated to, you know, keeping people safe. COVID was a stressful time for all of us, but it was nice to have someone that was so dedicated to being, you know, it makes it a lot easier to like kind of give up your social life and give up some of these things when you know that the rest of the team is doing it with you. And we're all sacrificing for the benefit of the whole, you know, and that's really what we did. We all kind of shut down and we all locked down pretty good. You know, we were so focused on like not being the winery that got COVID in the middle of harvest and had to shut down for 2 weeks, you know, and lose that time. I mean, that can kill you. So there was that on top of it. It was nice because I felt comfortable. I felt safe going to work even during COVID, which was great. And then the smoke rolled in. You know, like I told you, I was doing a vineyard relations position. Again, a crazy experience that completely catapulted like what I was comfortable doing from the start of harvest to the finish of harvest of what I was kind of forced into being a part of and learning. Crazy learning opportunity. It was pretty heartbreaking, if I'm completely honest. It was really devastating, and I know a lot of people share that sentiment in the Valley. It was so hard to be the person out on the ground, you know, leading up to that season, meeting these growers, watching the vines and the, you know, fruit develop and seeing what an incredible vintage it was coming up to be, and then to watch something kind of decimate all of that so quickly with no control of any of it. You know, I remember just like driving home and everything is orange and dark, and I remember looking up at the sky and being like, God, if it opened up and Godzilla jumped out, like, I would not be surprised, because that's how scary and threatening and unnatural it looked, that it was like, this is the moment. If something was gonna come, it would be right now. and I would just not be surprised. So it was an absolutely brutal vintage, emotionally and physically as always, and just a lot of stress and a lot of strain, and completely heartbreaking to have to come to growers and be like, okay, you know, we've both worked really hard at this. I've just started developing, you know, this relationship with you. I'm dedicated to this. Now we're screwed. What are we going to do from here, you know? So, I mean, I think Louisa handled it really well. She handled it with a lot of grace, a lot of like, you know, from her I always want to pull like her kind of calm, cool, and collected mentality, similar to what I saw with Nicole at Stolo. It's just kind of this like zenness, you know. She walked in and like her motto for the whole vintage was cautiously optimistic. You know, and I think we maintained that really well, even till, you know, me leaving Ponzi, like to the end of it, like we maintained that mentality of like the 2020 vintage, you know, we're cautious, but we're optimistic. This is something unprecedented for the Valley. Like we, you know, people don't know what's going on here, but I think it was a great experience and a great show of like what this community does, and everybody just kind of pulled together. You know, I think in a time like that, there's a lot of opportunity for people to turn on each other and to pull away and to get secretive and seclusive of what they're doing and you know, weird and kind of sneaky about things. And I feel like we pushed in the opposite direction, and the community here really just pulled together, and everybody just kind of like, we're like, well, we're all in it together. This is going really poorly. Let's see what we can do with it, you know, in the best way possible. It was heartbreaking, but like joyous in a lot of ways as well. Just seeing how everything kind of pulled back together of trying to make the best of what we could, you know? But yeah, brutal vintage. Yikes.
Especially with your role with as sort of vineyard liaison, tell me about the responsibility or I guess, or the pressure you felt. Tell me about kind of handling that. You're talking about people's livelihoods and their, you know, an annual crop. How did you kind of negotiate that line for yourself and with these relationships you're just trying to build?
Yeah, that was, I think, probably the most difficult part of the vintage. I'm a pretty sensitive, you know, sometimes overly empathetic person, and it was completely crushing for me to have to be like the first person to like put the fingers out there and be like, do you have crop insurance? You know, what do you have going on? You know, how can we do this that's going to protect both of us in the same way? And, you know, completely understanding where they're coming from and feeling their pain and knowing their sadness, because I feel in it too. It was so devastating to be a part, like finally really be a part of watching that fruit grow, and then to know that it was all ruined, and to go there and look at the clusters and be like, these look beautiful, but like, you know, they taste bad. You know that there's something there that you just can't see. Yeah, being in that role was absolutely devastating, and I think that, you know, I tried to handle it the best that I could. I tried to remind myself, you know, at the end of the day, it's a business, and try the best that I could to pull my emotions out of it a little bit, because if I didn't, it was going to really pull me down, pull me under. You know, and I think for us, luckily, we had, you know, Ponzi works with some really incredible growers and some really wonderful, understanding people. And, you know, for the most part, everybody was really, really gracious in how we communicated and how we handled it together, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're all in this industry together. You know, we do different parts, we do different aspects, but we're all one big, you know, general team. We're all here to make wine and make a really amazing product. And I'm really thankful for the way that a lot of the growers addressed the situation and how they interacted with me. I think Louisa was really great in supporting me in that role as well, and knowing in certain moments where it was appropriate to have me handle some situations and where she needed to step in and kind of take things on as, you know, the owner and the final say of things. Because, you know, sometimes it's easy to shoot the messenger because they're there and they're the one giving you bad news. But, you know, she was really good in recognizing that she was the one taking the final decision. She obviously has a lot more experience than I do, a lot more weight behind her. and she definitely stepped in and helped out when she needed to and helped me keep things in perspective, because it was, brutal. Brutal to say the least.
Well, during that answer, you mentioned the next part of my question, which is leaving Ponzi. So tell me about taking the next step for you and where you are now.
Yeah. So I did 2.5 years there. And like I've told you, it was fantastic. I wouldn't trade it for anything. An absolutely incredible experience. I think it's absolutely built my confidence in more ways than I can count, in what my capabilities are, and feeling really comfortable in moving throughout this industry, and taking that next step. So at the start of 2021, I actually got promoted to cellar master, and I took on that role for about 6 months. But even in my start of coming to Ponzi, I knew that it wasn't going to be a long-term position for me. When I started at Ponzi, I wanted to transition to full-time. I wanted to get in the cellar full-time. But for me, it was always going to be a bit of a stepping stone. I always knew that I was like, okay, probably a year, maybe 2, max out. And so that's what I did. I did 2.5 years. I kind of hit that point, I got that great bump in position, which was awesome, and it meant a lot to me that they saw that in me and that they wanted to push me into that position, and I'm really thankful to Louisa for that, always. But it just was time. It was time for something different. I think with COVID as well, you kind of, it was like everything was stagnant for a year, and I really feel like I lost a year in this valley, and I just started getting itchy. I needed something different. You get that kind of like harvest bug jump, want to travel itch. Got to shift things around, and I contemplated for a long time of do I move back to California? Is this the right time? I mean, I might as well. If I'm leaving a full-time gig for something, I should do something really different. So I played with the idea of, international harvest, which this is not really a great time to try to do. It's just a struggle to do it, but if I could have, I would have. I thought about going back to California, but I just knew that it was time to go. And I saw this job posting on Facebook for a position with Leah Jørgensen Cellars. I had just heard about Leah Jørgensen for the first time a couple weeks before, from my sweet friend Annette, and she had worked with Leah a little bit and just helped out in the cellar here and there, and she opened a bottle of Gamay for me, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. These are some really fun labels. This sounds really interesting to me. It's something totally different than what I've done. And this opportunity presented itself, and I was like, this could be kind of cool, It's a bit of a leap of faith, It's a completely different production size all over again, and that was kind of when I recircled back to the idea of always wanting to return back to micro boutique. I knew I always wanted to come back to small, and I felt like I had gotten all of those really great experiences that I had really sought for, and there wasn't really anything within my experiences that I felt like I was completely lacking. And I was like, you know what? This is just kind of a good time to make that transition back down to something tiny. It's what I've always wanted to return to. It's always going to be a leap of faith to do. It's always going to feel scary, and I'm always going to question whether or not it's the right call, but it just kind of was kismet again, just a moment of it's presented itself to me. I think I should probably go for it. So I reached out to Leah. We did an interview. It went really, really well, and she's kind of looking for some growth in her company, and I feel like I've got the skills and the capability to help her with that in every way that she needs. And again, it was just kind of a really good fit. And so I just kind of took the leap of faith. So I decided to leave Ponzi, stayed with them for about another month and said goodbye, and not completely goodbye. Louisa let me stay on. I'm doing the vineyard liaison position through the end of the season, which is really, really awesome. I get to kind of, have an extended say goodbye to all my growers and the relationships that I've developed, and, see the fruit through one more time. So I'm really thankful to maintain that bit of connection with them. I'm going to go see her tomorrow, so I'm really excited, and get out and see the fruit. So I'm excited for that, and it kind of helps maintain that a little bit. But yeah, I said my goodbyes for the most part, and I'm working with Leah Jørgensen now, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. I mean, she's got a ton of potential for growth. She's, you know, it's a big opportunity, I think, for the both of us. So I'm really excited. I think it'll be I keep calling it like I'm on an adventure. Who knows where it's going to lead, you know? We'll see.
Tell me about the kind of in your mind at least, or in Leah's mind, the role, your role in that growth, and what you're kind of bringing to the table, and maybe how you see the growth going.
Yeah. So right now I'm just a cellar assistant with her. So, you know, we're working out of Raptor Ridge at the moment, and I'm helping with anything and everything she needs. So any sort of cellar work that needs to be done, that's on me. Any kind of help she needs with hospitality. I'm doing tastings and stuff right now, which I haven't done in like 5 or 6 years. So I'm like, this is kind of crazy, but kind of fun to do this again. See that side. You know, what I think I really appreciate about Leah so far is that, you know, while my main job and while my main title right now is mostly production, like I'm included in every meeting that our team has, which is awesome. It's a super fun opportunity to hear more about the marketing and sales side of a company and see more of everything than just in the production, which is a big part of why I wanted to go back to small, to get my hands on everything again. You know, she wants to get me, she knows that I love being in the vineyards, so she wants to get me as included with the vineyards and the new growers and whatever that we move forward with as possible, which is awesome. She's helping me learn more about, you know, working with Southern Oregon fruit. Whole new game field all over again. I'm like, okay, we're just learning. We're gonna figure it out, but it's really, really fun. It's fun to return back to, you know, like Paso Robles is like mostly like limestone soils and a lot of, I can't remember the word I'm trying to think of, but it's similar to what we're finding in what we've got in Southern Oregon. You know, she's got these big blown up pictures on the wall with the, with like the ancient fossils in them, and it's the same kind of stuff we're working with in Paso Robles. So it's really fun to kind of return back to that. I'm really excited to return back to working with Cab Franc, and kind of move away from Pinot Noir. I've done Pinot Noir for the majority of my career now, and it's been awesome, and I love it, and it's super fun, but I'm excited to do something completely different, and I think it'll kind of help bridge that gap a little bit too if I ever do decide to go back to California, get a little more experience with Cab Franc and some Malbec and some fun stuff. So yeah, I'm working in the cellar with her. I think kind of what we'd both like to move towards is like, you know, she's got a lot on her plate. She's running a business. She just had a baby recently. You know, she's got a lot going on. So what I keep telling her is I'll take as much as you're willing to give me. Whatever you don't want to do and get off your plate, I'll take it. So, you know, I think the goal is to kind of move me towards running her cellar a bit. We're moving facilities to Harper Voigt in August, in McMinnville, which is going to be really exciting. It's going to be a fun custom crush facility. I've never done custom crush. I've never worked in custom crush. So it's going to be really cool to learn a whole new aspect of the business, of watching as potentially we try to bring on new clients, watching as Harper Voigt brings on clients, and kind of learning that relationship and those dynamics, meeting a bunch of new people in the industry that I've never worked with. And I'm excited about trying working alongside like a secondary team. You know, they'll have their own winemaking team and we'll be our own little team, and learning how to navigate that, you know, and being back in a facility that has like more people going on, you know. Ponzi, we're a decent sized team, but you see the same people every day, and, you know, we've got a whole flow, and I think this will be something completely different, a whole new dynamic. So I'm really excited about that, and I love the prospect of like being in a new facility and kind of like making it my own, and like bringing everything that I've learned of all my years in the industry, of like how to kind of meld that all into one. So I'm really excited to see where I can help push the production and what I can learn from Leah. I think she reminds me a lot of Nicole, and kind of like her desire to be more of like a mentor relationship, and that's kind of what I've always wanted to work towards, is like finding someone that can really help hone in like the details of winemaking, you know, the intuition and the following your gut of like how to really make those decisions and make wine. You know, I know all of the processes of like how to do things and whatever, but you know, the nuances. I'm looking for someone to kind of help me find my own, you know, find my own way and find the nuances and see what she does and why she does it. So I'm really excited to learn her methods and her processes.
So you've talked a bit about the sort of the Oregon wine community and your work with it, or kind of you're getting to know it. Obviously, not your last year notwithstanding. Tell me about the Oregon wine community. What have you found here that has excited you, and has it changed at all since you got here? Yeah,
what I think I love about it is the true sense of community. When I was in Paso Robles, you know, I grew up in that region. I knew a lot of people just because I grew up knowing them. Nicole was great in taking me out around and introducing me to people. So I always felt a lot of community there, you know, community in my social life and community within the industry. And there was always a sense of camaraderie. You know, it was like, I didn't work at Rhoda in like 3 years, and I could call them up and be like, hey, I need this. And they're like, yeah, come get it, you know. And there was a lot of like giving and a lot of sharing, which I've always appreciated, you know. And as an intern there, you got to know the other interns, and it was kind of like a group mentality, and I really enjoyed that. And not to say that it was completely different in some of the other places that I've been, but I just saw it a little bit less. Like in Australia, I didn't see so much of a camaraderie, and you know, I knew the guys that I worked with, but like they didn't take us out to meet anyone else that worked in the industry. You know, they didn't really have friends that hung out in the industry. The other people that I met that they knew were people that did other stuff. So I didn't have that same sense of camaraderie. New Zealand was a little bit different. It was more kind of that same feel, but I think that's what I love about Oregon, is it has that same camaraderie. You know, even quickly, like my first vintage in 18 here, I met so many people, and it was amazing to walk in and do a vintage, and after a couple of months, like kind of feel like you fell into a rhythm, and you know, going around town and seeing people that you know, and you know, having shared places and shared experiences, and kind of that same giving mentality. And like, you know, 3 years in, I still talk to the people, you know, everyone that I worked with at Soter, I still talk to on a regular basis. You know, Chris has continued to be a great resource and a really great mentor as well. You know, I know that he's someone I can depend on and call upon, you know, and he called me when I was at Ponzi. It was like we would call him for favors, he would call us for favors. And I think in 2020 vintage, like watching everything that happened, it was like such a wonderful show of the camaraderie of the Oregon wine industry. You know, it was such an easy moment to like, again, just shut down and not share with people what you were going through and try to be like, no, nothing happened, like nothing, I don't know what you're talking about. But instead, what I saw was people opening up their doors and being like, come and taste what we have, because this is what we're working with. So this way you have an idea of, you know, like we're the first ones to pull fruit in from this area. Come and see what we've got. And it helped educate the other people in the industry. You know, Louisa reached out to a ton of her contacts and just called people. You just call people, which is, you know, in an age of like Google everything, it's great to be surrounded by people where you can just call people and ask and find out what their opinions are, their experiences, and to not have to feel distrustful or suspicious of whatever it is they're telling you, to know you can call someone and they're just going to tell it to you straight. I think that's one of my favorite things about the industry here.
Well, obviously part of the community here are all the different kind of organizations and nonprofits around Oregon wine, and obviously you're hooked up now with AHIVOY, which I'm formerly a board member of.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you came to know about it and your work with it so far, and kind of what you hope to get out of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it. This is like, another one of the reasons that I love being in Oregon so much is to be a part of AHIVOY. It wasn't something that I have seen in any of the other regions or that I've heard about anywhere else. It was, let's see, I first heard about it at Assemblage in, what was that? Was that 2020?
It was 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, I'm like, that was like 7 years ago, right? Yeah, Assemblage in 2020. I remember seeing Sophia speak and just being completely blown away and being like, wow, this is a really cool program. This is something I want to be involved with. And again, it was one of those pushes out of my comfort zone where I like really forced myself. I was like, this is something I'm really excited about. I'm going to go talk to her, which is not something I normally do. I try not to approach people too much, but I was like, okay, I have to do this. And so I went and I talked to her. You know, I had a coworker in mind that I thought would be great for the program and perfect, and it would be beneficial for everyone involved. So I just went and chatted with her and was like, I think I've got a coworker. Do you guys have spots available? And she was like, yes. You know, she gave me her email. We chatted a little bit, and kind of that was that. And again, so thankful to Louisa. She's always been really supportive of kind of my interest in pushing, you know, in that sort of direction, those initiatives. So we were able to get one of the vineyard stewards from the Ponzi vineyard team into the first AHIVOY session, which was awesome. We got to watch him go through it, and you know, Louisa shares the interest in kind of partnering with AHIVOY as much as possible. And so, you know, I reached out to Sophia again in 2021 asking if there was anything that Ponzi could do, you know, just wanted to be a part of it. If we could offer support, if we could offer wine, if they needed a donation, you know, whatever they needed in support, we wanted to be there for them. And Sophia ended up asking if we could host the graduation, and we were like, yes, we would love to. Let's look at COVID restrictions, but yes, you know, and so we kind of navigated that. They ended up going, they had already planned with Argyle, something, whatever had happened. But we ended up being able to host them, and they did a session, you know, the last class did a session where they watched some panel, and then they got to do a tour, and, you know, so they got to come on site, which was great. Unfortunately, I was out of town for it, so I missed the whole thing. But just being able to be a part of it was really, really fun for me. My mom is Mexican, I'm half Mexican, and that's a part of my identity that I hold really dear, because we lost a lot of our culture growing up. I don't have a lot of the culture that follows through in my life, but it's something that means a lot to me. And you know, at every winery I've worked at, other than international places where I haven't been able to work with any Hispanic people really, but every winery I've worked at, there's been, you know, people that I've been able to bond with and connect with, Hispanic people that I've really enjoyed, that have always just kind of taken me under their wing and taught me everything that they could, and they've been so instrumental in pushing my career forward, and I want to be as useful to that community as I possibly can be. So it was such a great opportunity, and Sophia ended up emailing back and being like, I think she emailed Louisa even and was like, is Emily interested in getting involved? Like, we've got committees, like, I'd really like to get her into this. And Louisa CC'd me back on and was like, I think she'd like to. Emily, what do you think? And I was like, yes, please, yes, please. I'd love to. So she got me on the marketing committee, which has been so much fun and really exciting, you know, and it's still new, and I'm still trying to get my bearings of what I can really do and what I can offer, but it's something that I find a lot of fulfillment in, that I really want to be involved with as much as possible. So I got to drive in the Pride Parade at Remy Wines for the AHIVOY, and you know, I'm helping with the silent auction that we've got coming up in September, and it's such a fun opportunity to reach out and really kind of solidify the community that I've built for myself, and reach out to all of the friends that I have now, and, you know these people and know them as friends, and know that they're loving and giving, and see them want to kind of come together and support this same cause that I feel really passionate about. So it's been a ton of fun.
How's battery?
Good.
Okay. So we talked a little about kind of what you've seen as part of Oregon Wine. Tell me about the future of the industry from your perspective. And obviously, you don't have to be a historian here. You don't have to know all, see all. What's as the industry's coming out of the pandemic, coming off of a really rough harvest, tell me about what 2021 looks like so far to you and what you kind of see the industry looking like over the coming years.
Yeah. I think to me, Oregon wine industry is like total resilience. I totally see us bouncing back. I see us kind of rolling with the punches and continuing to prove that we know what we're doing. We've got great experience. We're in a great region. We make beautiful wines, and we're going to continue to do so no matter what happens. I think with 2020, there's going to be wines that are going to come out, and some of them are going to be a little rough because that's the reality of the situation. And, I hope that people can be understanding that that's to no fault of the growers or the winemakers and anyone behind production. That's just what we've had to work with. And I think we're still going to see some really beautiful wines come out of it, albeit different from what we would usually get for a vintage, but beautiful in their own right, something unique, something different. But yeah, I see us continuing to move forward and rolling with it and making something amazing moving forward. Obviously we hope for not another smoky vintage. Again, the reality of the situation, pretty likely we'll continue to have smoke infected vintages. That seems to be the way the world is moving. I think it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited to see the new prospects, with climate change and seeing how it moves forward and what we start planting and, what the future of the Willamette Valley could be. I don't know. I think some people are like, no, we're gonna maintain our Pinot, and I think Pinot will always have its place here. But I'm excited to see what we can work with going forward and what comes in anew. And we've put our name on the map with Pinot Noir, and I'm excited to see what we can put on the map next.
Since you're just getting started in the industry and have kind of hopefully a long career ahead of you to look forward to, fingers crossed, is there something you're looking forward to, a change or something new the industry could do that you're looking forward to? And on the other hand, is there anything that you're kind of afraid of in the future as you look ahead here in Oregon?
I think I'm naturally a relatively optimistic person, I think.
Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic, exactly. I'm gonna have to get that tattooed on somewhere, huh? I don't have a ton of fears. I try not to kind of live in the mentality of fears. I think my biggest fear is, seeing what happens with smoke, continuing on and on and on. But an opportunity for learning and an opportunity for growth, and so much education can come from that, which is great. I guess that would be my biggest fear. What was the other half?
Looking forward to.
Looking forward to, yeah. I think what I'm looking forward to the most is more programs like AHIVOY, more programs that promote and push inclusivity and equity within our industry. It's an industry that's been built on the backs of a lot of white men, coming forward. And I'm excited as I see more and more women get involved in the industry, more and more people of color. And I'm really excited to see what AHIVOY can do in promoting people that are the backbone of our industry. If we did not have all of these workers in our vineyards, we could not make wine. And to see them finally, hopefully, get the recognition that they deserve and the respect that they deserve, and a more equal opportunity for them to move up in the industry if they want to. If they want to be a winemaker, they should be a winemaker. And I'm excited to hopefully be a part of moving that forward.
Let's talk about your own future then, since we've talked about the industry's future. Obviously, just starting off on a new career here. What are you looking ahead to for yourself, both in the industry and perhaps beyond?
For myself, I want to keep moving on the trajectory that I'm on right now. I think, eventually one day, winemaker, that would be great. I'd love to work at something like Stolo. I always come back to Stolo. It was the winery of my heart, I always call it. So something like that, something small, something with estate fruit, that would be great. Something I could really sink my teeth into and get really involved with. But I think the main thing I want to do moving forward is to just continue to get more involved with the community. Being a part of AHIVOY is, like I said, so fulfilling for me, and if I could continue to, be someone that brings the community together and continues that kind of camaraderie, I would love to be as involved in the industry as a whole as possible, as opposed to kind of hiding out in a cellar. I want to, like I've said, the people are the most important part for me. I think it's what matters the most to me, and it's what keeps me in this industry, is the people that I continue to meet have been absolutely life-changing. So that's what I want to keep kind of focusing on, is bringing people together.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but is Oregon the future for you?
Oh man, my mom's gonna watch this. I think for a while, yeah. I think for now it's been great. For now, I have no reason to turn my back and walk away from this industry right here in Oregon. It's given me so much. I've enjoyed it so much. It's really becoming a second home. I'm going on 3 years, so I'm doing pretty good. So I think as long as I'm happy here, and as long as I have the means to go home as often as I can, then I'll be okay for quite a while. My dad's pushing for a full-time commitment. I'm not quite there yet. I think, California's always going to tug at me for a while, so we'll see. But for now, definitely.
Excellently political answer. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Very impressed.
Got to keep my mom happy.
If someone were to come to you and ask for your words of wisdom or your advice on getting into the industry, particularly getting into a production role, tell me what would you tell them?
My best advice, I think, would be to take every opportunity you can. No job is too little in this industry. You really got to start at the bottom. I sure as hell have. I've cleaned a lot of drains, cleaned a lot of floors, done a lot of bottom of the barrel work. But I think the flip side to that is to absolutely know what you're worth, and know that, sure, you're doing dirt work, but you should always get paid for it. You should always be compensated appropriately. This is still somewhat skilled labor. It's still, we deserve it. We work really hard in this industry, I think it's always important to keep in mind. I just watched your interview with Mordecai from the other week, and I worked with him at Soter. He's great, so it's really fun to watch. But he kept circling back to, we're just making wine. And it's true, we're just making wine. We're not saving lives. Doesn't mean we're any less passionate about it, which is huge. But, take every opportunity you can. Ask as many questions as you can. That's what's really pulled me through. And absolutely know your worth.
An excellent answer.
Thank you.
All the questions that I have for you today, is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Is there anything we didn't cover here that we should have covered?
Not that I know of. Feel pretty good.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. Wonderful stories, your thoughtful answers.
Thank you.
We'll let you off the hook.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.